This episode is proudly supported by Westholme Australian Wagyu. Here's Stephen Sinclair from Jackson's on George.
In general, Westholme, I use several items on the menu from them. I always look to source products for their flavour. And with Westholme, I think they deliver that 100%. Australian Wagyu, in particular, Westholme is world class. Westholme is recognised for their quality all over the world. And then that's why, and when I tried it, and I absolutely love the flavour. This is, why I decided to put them on the menu.
Westholme believe that when nature leads, flavour follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
Often, including the beer and the wine, everything on that plate can be from within 50 or 100 metres of where you're sitting. And I think that when you can honestly say that that's what's happening, that's kind of special.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Although everyone writes their own story in life, in hospitality, the variables of the team and the whim of the diner can play a role in the direction you take your business, in most cases. Some build their own place, remain very hands-on, and are at the whim of the elements rather than food trends. Evan Marler is the co-owner and chef of Laggan Pantry in Laggan Village, New South Wales. Evan, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
It's great to get you on the show. You're doing something a bit different and special in regional New South Wales. How are things at the moment?
Yeah, we're doing really well, thanks, Huck. And you're a legend, so I'm humbled in your presence to let you know that. We're just, sort of, don't want to say Groundhog Day, but everything's, plodding along really well out here. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Laggan Village.
Laggan Village is small. There's a very small population. We have a little pub here, which is fantastic. There's us and a few houses and a little local school. That's about it. And we're not far from Crookwell, which is a really resourceful little town.
Tell us sort of why you chose that location to do what you do.
Okay, so Sal and I were looking to buy a property, and obviously we weren't able to afford to get into somewhere like the Southern Highlands or all these other, well-known destinations. So we were looking within our budget, and at the time we were shown this property by a real estate agent, and with the possibility of leasing it, actually, not to purchase it. And we walked away from here thinking, what an amazing property. Someone's going to kill it there eventually. And 2 years later, we ended up settling on it. So that's a whole story in itself. But the location is cool climate, very seasonal, and coming from the sort of snow area, that really works for us because we're at elevation here. It's cool and very fertile country. Beautiful.
Tell us about Laggan Pantry. What are you guys doing there? I know there's so many elements to it, but take us through it.
Yeah, Huck, it's complicated. So we have primarily we have our restaurant, which is a gorgeous garden location restaurant. But we also happen to grow as much as we can to supply the restaurant. So along with that comes all the extensive agriculture and irrigation and everything you might think with greenhouses, kitchen gardens, etc. We also have a small, what we call a nano brewery here. So we brew our own beer, which is available in the restaurant, of course, is always on tap over the road at the pub, and occasionally does some little takeovers or pop-ups in Canberra, down the south coast, and even in Sydney on occasion. But we are small. We also have a little B&B here, a gorgeous little cottage, historic cottage, which was converted originally from a shearing shed. And we do a dinner, bed and breakfast package in there. And that's a very special little place. And we're very proud of that. Of course, we live on site. So we have a gorgeous old stone building which we live in, which was built in 1837 as the original police barracks. And like a lot of the villages in this area, they're spaced about as far as a horse could go back in the day. And of course, all the roads were being built, so they needed somewhere to comfortably house convicts at night. And underneath our house are the holding cells and tunnels where that happened, along with rumoured bushrangers and things like that as well. Ben Hall, apparently, but yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, of course, now those holding cells are where we grow our mushrooms. They're our cellar for our reserve list. We've converted that into quite an amazing little space under the house where things definitely go bump in the night.
Being so remote, does that have an impact on the way you run things and access to the produce you might need that you don't grow and water, all of those sort of elements?
Absolutely. That is probably one of the most challenging day-to-day things to do with Laggan Pantry and our lives, obviously. Like I said, we're at elevation, we're at 900 metres, so when the storms come through, they come through. We will get a late frost right into Christmas time and lose everything we've planted. We've just recently had an earthquake, which was really frightening. We had a hailstorm on Christmas Day, which blitzed everything. We have a lot of power outages, whether they're planned or not. During snowstorms, it might bring down the power lines, and we're totally self-sufficient at that point with our generators have to go on. You know, we need to keep the show going. We have to supply our own water because we're not on town water, so we have a whole system in place to monitor that. And look, ultimately, once it goes through all its pumps and filters and second filters and third filters and it gets into either the beer or into a coffee, you can actually tell, you know. So the final product is amazing. But then, of course, the other side, the not so fun side, is that we need to treat our own sewage and all the effluent that might come from the B&B, the restaurant, etc. And we need to keep that up and running. So everything, I suppose, from, yeah, but you've got an electric drill in your hand or you've got a mop, whatever it is, you know, it is sort of sometimes survival mode out here for sure. Look, you asked also about the deliveries. The supply chain from the markets to Canberra and Sydney is extraordinary. I mean, as you know. So we just really need to try and tap into that. But that might mean that we are, you know, putting some kilometres on the ute, getting around with our fridges on the back and doing what we can to get produce. But that said, we are very close to some incredible producers. I mean, I suppose anywhere in regional New South Wales, there's amazing produce wherever you are. We've got award winners, though, just down the road with duck, heritage, pork. We have obviously potatoes, needless to say. And, you know, in the immediate area, we've got an extraordinary winemaker. And so, you know, if we need to change a menu up and just sort of hunker down, we can do that as well. So pros and cons, huh?
That's amazing. What sort of things are you growing on the property? What sort of works there?
Oh, good Lord. Okay. So I'll take a moment just to say right now indoors, we have probably close to 2,000 seeds germinating. So they're all on heat pads and they have a little light to give them some direction so they grow up straight and, you know, get ready. We'll then put them into our greenhouse until they're of a good enough size and then we roll the dice with frost. Hopefully we make the right decision and everything then gets planted out all over the place and everything's as much as we can automated and because it is just Sal and I again. That's the thing. No gardeners jumping around or anything. And so that will be everything, every type of brassica you could imagine, anything that might make it into a sauce, a soup, whatever it might be. Then we've got all of our fruit trees, quince, apple, we have nuts, we've got pears, lots of different types of apples actually, which make it into the cider as well. We are growing all sorts of berries, old school ones that hurt like hell when you try and pick them, right through to the modern varieties, thornless blackberries and things like that, and a whole heap of raspberries. So with all of this and the things like the citrus out of the greenhouse and, you know, we've got the black currants, red currants and things like this. All of this mostly makes it into preserves, jams. We jar as much stuff as you can. And I think Laggan Pantry, the name, sort of represents that there might be something on a shelf in here. That's exactly what's going on. But the rule there is that it must be grown here before it gets into one of those jars or bottles.
That's extraordinary. With so many elements to your business and the sort of restrictions of kind of where you are and the way that you run the business. Do you ever get a day off? Like how does that all work?
Negative. we do not stop. It's bittersweet. You know, there are times where when we walk around this property and we need to pinch ourselves. We can't believe what we own, where we are. It's absolutely stunning, and we keep it that way for the guests. But then, obviously, if we need to get off site if we're going to try and have any downtime. And I think anybody who in any industry realizes that, sometimes the phone needs to be switched off and you need to remove yourself from that, because when you're sort of, I suppose, a little bit compulsive, like both Sally and I are, you'll always find something to do, and that can go all the way into, midnight or whatever.
Well, I want to explore what you're doing there in greater detail in a little while. But take us back to when you were young. Whereabouts did you grow up and what sort of role did food play?
Okay, I was Sydney boy, and for me, I suppose, looking back at being very young, I loved fishing. So fishing and then eating whatever we caught was a big part of growing up in my family. And we were lucky enough to have a boat in the Hawkesbury for a while, where all I wanted to do was to fish and cook that fish straight away. I think then as we started to grow, I had a brother and a sister as well, and we became teenagers. I really loved camping, became big on hiking, mountain hiking, ice climbing, everything that I could do, which was outdoors. And we used to do these huge treks through the backcountry of the Snowy Mountains, and they were sort of obviously carry your own food in, cooking in a snow cave or cooking in a old backcountry hut, and just with fire. And that I never knew at the time what sort of a foundation that was laying for me. And I realized that sort of almost survival mode of cooking, keeping yourself alive 2 weeks out in the middle of nowhere, actually started to create, in hindsight, a character within myself, which was carried through. And it was only sort of now that I realized that is your foundation, and so that sort of, as a child and as a teenager, that's all cooking was for me. Quite simple.
The hospitality wasn't necessarily the path that you were going to go on. Tell us about sort of your career and then how hospitality sort of became a part of it.
Okay, so I mentioned the backcountry down the Snowy Mountains. For some reason, I've always loved the snow and mountains. So I moved down there and actually worked on a farm picking berries in Dalgety. And when the first winter kicked in, watching the seasons change, I couldn't ignore it. There was something in me at that stage. I was young, 18, 19. So I was really captivated by that. And then the snow came. And so lucky to have had a friend whose older brother was one of Australia's best snowboarders. And he taught me how to snowboard. And I was terrible for quite some time. But I thought I looked cool and I thought I was killing it. So I just kept doing it and eventually started working in ski resorts and got better at snowboarding and eventually started instructing, as you do. And also love skiing. So tried to learn how to ski and snowboard and went down that road. Anyway, at night, I then had to start working out how to figure some money out because the rent in the snowy villages is extraordinary and I wasn't making enough money on the mountain. I think I might have told a little fib to a chef in an Italian restaurant just to get in. I think I might have said to him, hey, cooking's my future, cooking's my life, I love it, I want to do it. And anyway, I got in. And I started at the bottom and just worked up. And every time I did something wrong, this guy used to clip me across the ear. It was a baptism by fire, to say the least, but it was also, in hindsight, one of the most traditional ways of learning a traditional cuisine possible.
You spent a couple of decades doing winter seasons in Australia and Colorado and bouncing back and forth. Do you have any stories from those adventures over those decades?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that was over such a long period of time. You've got to remember that, I started this pre-9/11, so that changed the face of travel, obviously. Travelling back and forwards from Sydney Airport to LA usually, or then into San Fran occasionally, working in Colorado. I mean, America's amazing. The geography of that place is extraordinary. And we used to live in a village which was at 9,000 feet. So quite high. A lot of people would feel that altitude, surrounded by massive peaks and the most gorgeous, pristine environment one could imagine. And that area of America allowed us, or where we were based anyway, there were so many other places to easily travel to and from. Las Vegas, that was a hop, skip and a jump, but wow, getting to check that out every, so often was extraordinary. And I won't tell you about those trips. Then, of course, other amazing places throughout the States. And, of course, amongst all of that, you've got not just the geography, but the extraordinary people you meet in a nation like that. But going back and forwards each year meant that we had 2 springs in a year, and that in itself was magic. Spring for me is really quite an important time of year. I think it's beautiful, blossoms, everything, Mother Nature doing its thing. And of course, coming back to Australia each year, you sort of start to feel how lucky we are here. I honestly believe that most of us don't know how good it is at home. And I think that traveling back and forwards, just, again and again, with that many seasons back to back, there's nothing like coming home once, but coming home so many times is really, really cool. When we're in the States, we were lucky enough to experience some of the, what they would call a 100-year storm. And I'll never forget some of those occasions when those storms come through, the pass closes due to avalanches, no one from the city can get up to you, and you have the entire place to yourself. Meanwhile, in 8-foot or 7-foot powder, usually you'd see a good 30 centimetre snowfall or something, but to have it over your head, needing a snorkel, is just extraordinary. And living that life, with snowmobiles and big F350s, I felt like a rock star.
Tell us about the decision to stop doing that and sort of find your feet and settle in Australia.
Well, Sally and I had done this together for quite some time, back and forwards. And we really did need to figure out some way of snapping ourselves out of that. It could have gone on forever. And every snow sports school around the world has got an 80-year-old instructor who's still there. It's highly addictive, but we knew we needed to get out. So we took a position in the Snowy Mountains, which was a year-round gig. And it was really hands-on. Through the summer months, Sal and I would run the cafe, the restaurant, the accommodation and everything. And during the winter, obviously, things would ramp up and we'd bring in a whole team or an army of staff and run this 30-bedroom hotel thing. And that went on for years and years. And that was our way of stopping travel, but getting into a full-time gig, which was based on our experience. So Sally's very strongly was brought up in hospitality, and I wasn't as such. So like anything magical, what I bring and what she brings makes the whole together. And we ended up just making other people a lot of money and doing a really good job at it. So that's how we basically stopped that perpetual season after season thing and sat still for the first time in many, many years.
Was it hard for you to adjust that sort of first year of, cutting out all that travel?
Well, you got to remember we're on snow. So I had a snowmobile. I still felt like that rock star. I could, when it was on for young and old, like when it snowed and it was cold and the snow was dry, we'd be out there. We'd just take the moment and we'd get out there amongst it, and we'd smash a couple of runs out down the mountain, and then we'd just get straight back in, shred off our clothes and get straight back into the kitchen for me or wherever we were on those days doing whatever. So that eased the pain as far as having that snowboard bug. But yeah, look, even to this day, I don't know if it's a smell or something that might trigger a memory. I think anybody would understand that, when you had great times earlier in your life, you'll always have great memories.
You mentioned that you were looking for a property, and the one that you landed, which you have now, it was originally up for lease, and 2 years later you bought it. Tell us about that period of time and how that all happened.
Okay, so yeah, when we first saw this property, it had been listed for an amount of money that was beyond our reach, but we were showed it by an agent who had in mind that we would lease it from the owners because they had some physical problems come up, and there was some good infrastructure here to start with, but we couldn't get anywhere close to the sort of money that they might have wanted, and we couldn't afford this property. Then over the course of time, they knocked back a few offers and the price on the property dropped once and then twice and then a third time. And we were on our dream holiday once in Fiji because we love diving. Sal and I are mad keen divers, and that's one of the best places in the world to do it. And I remember sitting on, this adults only awesome retreat that we were sitting at, and then Sal by the pool, I suppose. And then Sal mentioned that the place we were looking at was going for auction. And shortly after we returned to Australia, after that holiday, sure enough, at 4 a.m, I was packing up the car to head to this auction from the Snow Mountains up here to the southern tablelands. And I had a bank check in my pocket, which was written for all we were worth. And look, it got handed in on the day, not much interest at all. And you've got to remember, this is off the back of the global financial crisis. So, commercial lending was probably not going to happen. We were looking at it as a home at that point, though, and they didn't like our offer either. We did have that, what you call, first right to negotiate. And I drove back from here. Obviously, I'm like, we were okay. I was fine. It didn't happen. I quite frankly was probably relieved because the whole idea was scaring scaring the shit out of me. So we, after returning to Snow Mountains and getting straight back into dinner service that night, Sal and I just sort of tried to forget about it and move on. But this was something that Sally was hell bent on. She knew that this place had the magic. And we got this phone call out of the blue, I think 2 months later. And the real estate agent said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Oh, what's going on here?" And she said, they're willing to take your first offer, your original offer. Are you still interested? Are you still on the market, sort of thing? And we just said, yeah, done. So next thing we knew, we were sitting down signing heavy documents for the first time in a snowboarder's life, growing up right there pretty quick.
No, tell us about that first sort of year or two, sort of trying to shape the place into what you wanted it to be. What were the challenges with that?
Okay, so we were still working in the Snowy Mountains for that period of time. So we needed to do a 4.5-hour trip here if it was emergency style to get here in a hurry and back. And that did mean sometimes digging the snowmobile out in the middle of the night to then get to the car, to then dig it out and then drive through snow all the way down to Jindabyne and on. Some of those were unforgettable trips, but for that first couple of years, we were obligated to that company that we worked for. So we needed to hold that position. But at the same time, we're trying to get here to knock what was a neglected property back into shape. And I mean, to the point where we found 3 dams up on one of the paddocks that we had no idea were there because they're completely covered by blackberries, just a mess, and paddocks full of thistles, head high, 4-season grass and whatnot, which now are pristine waterways and golf course style lawns, and little black-faced sheep hovering around up there too. But that period of time was intensive, and if it wasn't for working in these properties in the snow, neither Sally or I would have really learnt the skills on how to apply that to our own. So it was a magic formula that unfolded at that point.
So you've been there almost a decade now trading. What's the decade been like running the business? Has it changed a lot in that period of time?
Absolutely. Again, 10 years is a long period of time. And yes, the restaurant is going into its 10th year. And I think we've owned the property now for 14 years. During that time in the restaurant, not only has the economy changed, COVID came and went. We've gone through some pretty rough droughts. There's been all sorts of things that could be thrown at not just us, but our industry. And during that time, we evolved ourselves. So when we first opened the restaurant, we, almost like a fishing net across a river, we just tried to get whatever we could. So we had a breakfast menu, we had a lunch menu, we had a dinner menu. We would do yes to a walk-in cup of coffee or yes to a wedding. We would just get it all. And everyone thought we were crazy for opening a restaurant here. Even our family thought, well, where are the people going to come from? But it wasn't that way. And, I really did probably practice too much on plan B and failing, but that never came. We never enabled plan B because from the day we opened, the people did come. There was a sort of a pent-up need for an eatery, at least in this area. And from that, we started realising that people were wanting not just the extraordinary service that Sal offers, but they wanted to feel that white tablecloth in the garden kind of experience. So sure enough, we started heading a little bit more towards, the talented side of the offerings. Started to offer, slightly more, I wouldn't say fine dining, but we definitely started to, hone our skills and trim the edges of what we were offering. And that was a huge journey in itself. So from going to an eggs Benny through to, well, I'm not going to say toothfish, but something like that.
Well, when you don't have a drill or a spade or something in your hand and you've got the tongs in your hand, you're in the kitchen. Like, tell us about how that feels and your approach to cooking.
Yeah, okay. So if it doesn't matter who the chef is that I talk to about this, there's always going to be a unique kitchen when it's a one-man band. So I've got to go back there for a moment and tell you that it is literally just me in the kitchen. No dish pigs, nothing. It's just me. And out on the floor is just Sally. There are no other staff to help her on the front of house either. So it is just the two of us. So for those of us in the industry, you can start to imagine what sort of a well-oiled machine you're going to need when you're booked out. You have a standard which you probably set too high, and because you're owner operator, you're looking at all your costs and everything, intensively. And then the flow in a kitchen for a one-man band, and I mean literally to the dishes are coming in and there's a main course going out. The way that kitchen, one-man kitchen runs is something to see in itself. And I can look down at my watch and it'll tell me that I've done 25 kilometres today with 15 hours of standing in a 3-metre square room.
Tell us about your food and your cooking. Is there a dish or two that you can tell us about that sort of exemplifies what you're doing there?
Yeah, okay. I mean, a lot of restaurants talk about paddock to plate, and they showcase their kitchen garden, and that is something that we're extremely proud of. So, a lot of dishes that you can experience here at Laggan Pantry always are going to be cooked by me, served by Sal, and grown mostly on site. Of course, we will always need to bring in produce from elsewhere. So we never promise 100% everything on the plate is from us. But often, including the beer and the wine, everything on that plate can be from within 50 or 100 metres of where you're sitting. And I think that when you can honestly say that that's what's happening, that's kind of special.
Absolutely. What have you got on the menu at the moment? Is there something you can tell us about that will give us an idea of what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So we do a 5-course set menu here, and we run that over sort of 2 time slots. And keeping in mind, we only ever sit 20 people in our restaurant at any given time. And that menu will always include some of the crowd pleasers. We change our menu regularly, but we're very aware that we need to do that within a certain boundary. We have an amazing return clientele from our locals here. We also cater for people driving up from Canberra, across from Sydney, or in from some of the towns, Orange, Mudgee, and foodies. So we need to try and cater for all those types. So we always choose premium proteins, and that's always going to please the foodie, and it's also going to please the farmer who's never been to a restaurant before down the road, because he's going to have the best beef fillet he's ever had. So we'll always stick to sort of those basic proteins. And I was joking about toothfish before. I can't really afford to put that on my menu, not at all. But it might not even hit the mark if I did. So we do push boundaries, and we love doing that, getting people outside their comfort zone a little. And I'm a huge seafood fan. So quite often our first course will be a lightly cured kingfish or a lightly cured tuna or sashimi scallops or something along those lines, which is going to really cleanse the palate when someone sits down. They're usually very refreshing and vibrant, and we might use daikon, cucumber, whatever it might be from our garden to create that crunchy element with it. And of course, in my world, the balance of acid is always crucial. So we're lucky to always have lemons coming out of our greenhouse, because growing lemons out here is breaking the rules of nature, right? And look, I've also got to sort of touch on one thing. We've always had a soup on our menu. And it's quite amazing how, well, first of all, a soup is sometimes the most expensive item on the menu. But it's quite amazing how soup is quite often the one that blows people's minds. Whether it's a broccoli and gorgonzola or whether you've just come up with a massive season of pumpkins and you roast them to get the caramel in there and make these soups. I honestly think that people have stopped doing that a lot in the home. And if they feel like a soup, they're grabbing a go one or a packaged one or whatever. And quite frankly, unless you've grown it yourself and then turned it into something like that and intensified the flavours, I think we need to revisit some of those really old school and, of course, nutrition.
I tend to agree. There is nothing better than an incredible soup, that's for sure. You mentioned Sal quite a few times, and you're an incredible dynamic duo there. What's it like finding that balance of working together and all the different elements of what you guys do? And are there challenges with that?
Yeah, definitely. Living and working together in any industry is going to present, I'm sure, challenges. Then let's throw back into the fact that we live on site. So we don't just live and work together. We work and live together. We're always here. Now, Sal is one of the hardest working, most incredible women I've ever met. Every single customer that's come into this restaurant has met her, but not necessarily me. They know she's incredible, and she's literally the most amazing thing that's ever happened in my life. But then to put that into the workplace, she ends up putting up with stuff from me she really doesn't need to put up with. I can have a moment in the kitchen and she needs to walk out that door smiling, and it's really quite extraordinary in hospitality how stress can creep in without you knowing it. And the next thing you know, you're actually feeling anxiety and maybe even frustration while plating up something so delicate, all happening inside your own head. And it's tricky when you work and live with someone to then go home and switch that off, because she knows how I spoke to her earlier and I'm in trouble,
Well, it's extraordinary what you guys are doing out there. Do you have any plans sort of for the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
Okay, so once the brewery got up and running and we realised that offering that as a pop-up here and there was a great way of keeping that alive and pumping, now that we've found our groove after COVID with all the technical side of the business, so, cancellation policies, things like that are really hard to talk about on both sides of the fence, and they're very hard to instigate. But it's very important in a tiny restaurant like ours that we have things like that in place so everyone sort of knows what to expect. And for us, we've found our groove. We have an amazing return clientele that trust us. And I think that's a blessing in itself, because right now as the economy definitely has a wobble and it affects a pub differently as to what it would affect a retail store. And of course, in a restaurant like mine, you're not sure what's going to happen in the next week or two. Are the bookings going to come in or not? And I think having that reputation and that trust is keeping us well above a worry zone. Where we're looking okay. And I think the way we sit right now, I think we just need to do more of it. I literally cannot fit more than 20 people on this property, even, especially if it's raining. I mean, we've got gorgeous outdoor seating here in the garden, but it is rare in Laggan when you can sit out there. It's windy, it's snowing, I don't know, flies, mozzies, whatever it is. It is much more comfortable inside. So I can't grow or upscale within this property itself. But the property is our home as well. So I don't necessarily feel like we need to change too much at the moment. And I think we've done most of our growth. And if we plod along like we are right now, I think, I can't imagine a better plan.
It does sound amazing. It's quite extraordinary what you guys have built there. What do you love about what you do?
Oh, there's so much. There's so much to love about what we do and what we've created here. The first thing that comes to mind really is that we've got some really good customers that have been coming for, the whole time, for years, and they've become really good friends. And I've found myself on occasion sitting down for a glass of wine with them at the end of their meal in my restaurant in this little town. And I mean, that's like your little locale, you know, that's such a cool thing. I mean, you got to love that. Lifetime friends, it's amazing. But then, like I said before, sometimes we stand still and we look around and we kind of have to pinch ourselves. We can't believe what we own, what we've got. And then to grow something and put it on the plate. I mean, sometimes people will say to you, I would never have ordered that typically. On the set menu, they're just going to have a go. They trust us. And then they might say something like, that was amazing. I would never have ordered that. And they love it. You know, I love that. That's like a big tick for me, better than any review or anything else, you know. And I suppose one of the things I love the most would be gadgets, tech, and appliances. I live and work here, right? So if I'm over in the house and I just feel like throwing a wood-fired pizza out, you know, I've got an awesome wood-fired oven. If I want to smoke something, my smoker's kick ass. It's really good. You know, how many air fryers and combi ovens and other gadgets, you know, that we've got here. So we don't stop cooking and experimenting. And, you know, I love that. I just walk out of my house and I've got a bar right or I walk out of my house and I've got a full commercial kitchen ready to just, you know, run amok with an experiment or something weird, or, you know, that's really cool.
That is extraordinary, and what an absolute joy to hear just a part of your story here on Deep in the Weeds. Look forward to hearing more of it, so please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you, Huck. You're a legend. Thank you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.